Hello, today's video is called Public Inquiry to Federal Government Invoking the Emergency Act on February 2022. Today was day 5. Today is October 19, 2022. The agenda for today's background, witnesses, and my point of view. As everybody knows, we are reviewing the inquiry that is taking place in the city of Ottawa regarding the reasons why Justin Castro invoked the Emergency Act on February 14, 2022 against the Canadians who were in the city of Ottawa protesting against the different mandates, and also understanding if the powers that he used were misused in any way or manner. Finally, there is a recommendation that needs to be placed in February of next year by the lead commissioner in English and French. Please note that due to the restrictions on the size of the hosting locations that I'm using for my channel and for my website, as well as all the videos, I am deleting previous videos. So if you want access to any previous video of this specific inquiry from days 1 to 4 in this moment and moving forward, please contact me through my website. There is an easy tab to do that, and the original files rest in this location where you can watch actually the whole thing unraveling live. Today we had 2 witnesses. We started at 9:45 and we just finished a few minutes ago at 7:50 p.m. The first witness was Diane Deans. She used to be the Ottawa City Councillor and Chair of Board of the OPS and Crime. So obviously she should have been, in theory, be able to have visibility of all the plans in place to make sure that the board was aware of what tactics and, most importantly, what was the strategy to take control of the city again. And she was, according to her testimony, she was in constant contact with Chief of Police Slowly. And again, they were all the time saying that Slowly, or she was saying that Slowly was saying, I would be surprised if they would be still here on Monday. So I'm putting it in quotes because those were exact words, which clearly is going to contradict the next witness, because there is clear visibility of communication with the police in writing several times every day before the arrival of the convoy, saying this is going to stay in the city for at least a certain amount of time, because what they're asking for is not going to be granted. The lifting of the mandates is not going to be given to them, and that's exactly what they're after. So they had visibility of this, and I'm wondering if this was obviously a key contributor in the resignation of Slowly that would take place very shortly after. The board, she ratified, they were aware of the operational plans, but they were never shown the details to her and the board. And on the 26th, the police knew they were not leaving, and this was presented to her when she was giving her testimony, and these documents, she confirmed that they were never disclosed to her. So it just confirms her testimony that she knew top level, but she didn't know all the details about this operation. On February 5th, she called an emergency meeting to address the need to understand what exactly were the plans in place to take control of the city. And Slowly was telling her all the time, don't call for meetings because it's going to take a lot of resources. So obviously she was in a little bit of a tough situation about that. And then she was obviously concerned about the fact that the resources that were originally intended for Ottawa, they were being deployed back to Toronto when there were a couple of demonstrations, particularly I think it's February 5th, when there was another one in Toronto, which obviously shows the capacity of the majority of us when we need to impact or create a demonstration. Well, that's a useful tool to know. Obviously, this is logically assumed, I think, that we are more than they are, but this clearly confirms that. There was a discussion about the injunction and the consideration about this note from a meeting on which they say that the injunction might be the worst way to go. So she was being asked by the commission councillor, what does that mean? It was an interesting moment because she was stopped by the councillor of the city of Ottawa, stating that this could be violating the client and council privilege, which I thought it was interesting because up to this point, never have I seen the structure that typically you can see in a court of law in which you have a lawyer and then the lawyer is trying to protect you, etc. Here was a clear intent to protect her, but then eventually she answers saying that the injunction could be denied if it was poorly written. So there was a need to do it properly. I personally don't believe that explanation, but again, that's what she said. I noticed today that she was present today. Obviously, everybody knows who she is, so I thought that was interesting. I have never seen her until today. And then here we have on February 5th the recommendation of Slowly to get the 1,800 officers without details of deployment. So the major apparently was reluctant to sign this letter to support Slowly's plan, which in my eyes, I think that it's obvious that he needed support from more people. So you can obviously see there was a lot of conflict internally. They didn't want to support each other and created more confusion that, in my opinion, didn't help with the invocation of the act. One thing I want to be clear about today is that I was absent for not extended periods of times, but relatively decent periods of time because I have a full-time job. So I'm trying to juggle many things. I'm doing my best because I find this very interesting. So please accept my apologies if things are not perfectly accurate, but at least I have an overview that I want to share with those of you who are interested. February 10, we got the first approvals that started to appear, but the swearing of the RCMP officers was taking place twice per day at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. But obviously there is a process of training, and also the swearing is necessary so they can reinforce the provincial bylaws. So I'm assuming the RCMP do have an oath, but it's different than the one that they have to do here in order to start to work in the city. Now here you can see the document that talks about the 250 RCMPs, and then in February 11 the resources were publicly announced at higher levels but not present according to the chief of police. So we see again more of the disconnection between the different entities that were supposed to be working cohesively. Here you can see that she worded this interesting. She said, "My concern was not because of the right to protest, but to the disruption of our lives." So you can see how selfish that position is. Go and protest somewhere else, and that's okay. Just don't disrupt my life. It's the type of belief that to me is a little bit disconcerting, because she is supposed to obviously make sure that there is no crime in the city, but at the same time, I don't believe there was any crimes being perpetrated. In fact, we're going to see in the next testimony that there's no proof that anything violent ever happened, even though, of course, they were aware it could have taken place. So February 12th is when the biggest increase in officers took place. There's a deployment chart that, again, is very difficult to read, but I found interesting to have all these resources, because obviously if you go to the website, all these documents will be available for everyone to see. So by February 14, the board didn't know the details of the plan. Remember that this is the day when the invocation of the Emergency Act took place. So interesting how she was completely isolated through the whole process, according to her, and apparently the documents seem to confirm that. There were some threats to her that were mostly through phone calls, and she declined protection because the most serious ones were being traced back to out of Canada. So I don't know. I wasn't there. Now, there is a channel that I noticed that is very interesting. I'm placing it here because he was going in great detail about some other videos from this counselor that is supposed to be wanting to be mayor of Ottawa, and she has been caught in tape with obstruction of justice. So I have no idea how she can have the capacity to continue her campaign. But again, we've seen worse things in this planet. And then there was another lady who's a counselor, and then she starts to cry on camera. So his question was obviously, well, if you're not that strong, you shouldn't be in that position. And I fully agree with him. So when I had to step away from the whole live feed is when he did this analysis. So if you want further details that you don't get with me, I think that that's a great channel to follow. He actually does a live coverage, which I obviously cannot do because I have to do other things. Okay, so let's continue with Diane. Interesting here, she admitted that there were leaks from information from the board, and knowing that there was a sensitive situation in the Rideau area. Remember that they say that there was a Quebec group, that they were a little bit more violent or whatever. I wasn't there. I don't know how to describe the situation because I don't believe anything that anyone tells me except things that I see for myself. And she kept complaining about not having any details. So there is a disconnection because you can't show that you cannot be trusted and then ask to be given information that is quite sensitive because you're trying to control a potential violent situation. So that was discussed as well. And then, very interesting, a board member was, as they call, pushed out, forced to resign, because he went to the convoy and he actually donated some food. So interesting. If any politician shows any act of kindness, of compassion, or even agreement with the general public that just was protesting to regain our freedom, well, that's not good. You have to go. Anyway, February 5th, he was asked for more details, and I'm talking about slowly, and then he provided them. And then this is very interesting. She asked Slowly to resign, and then he responded, and I quote her, "If you want me out, you will have to buy my contract." So clearly, Slowly was not getting along with her, and we're going to see in a minute that she was not getting along with the major either. February 15, the resignation of Slowly, and she admits there was a lot of racism against him. I don't like to talk about that, but if that's the case, that's the case. And that he was a scapegoat in the whole situation. I tend to disagree with that, the way I see it. And again, I'm not an expert in this, but I'm just listening to all these testimonies. I feel that Slowly was not able to understand or give credibility to the intelligence that was being brought to him to confirm that there was an intention for a long stay in Ottawa and then outline a plan. Here there was some questions from the Ottawa Coalition about sexual harassment allegations, some more testimony of Diane not getting along with another lady. And then, I mean, I don't even know why she would say this on the stand, that Arvin that we saw yesterday, he was very politically correct. I found him incredibly consistent in his testimony. And she said this phrase that I don't even want to repeat. So again, I don't understand why she does all these things to obviously create a bad atmosphere with all the colleagues. Next, of the things that she did that doesn't make any sense is that she taped the major without his consent. And very interesting, she said after Slowly resigned and then Peter came in, that was interim, she said, we need to bring somebody else on top of him just for a 3 to 10 month contract. And he obviously took the major by surprise. He was very politically correct in the call, but it sounds like she's sabotaging everyone and she's taping the major without his consent. She's just presenting a new person in the structure that obviously would, as the major said, it would destabilize the whole organization. So she said, the board already approved it yesterday. It was just a mess. So interesting how she was not really understanding how to politically be able to navigate in a savvy manner through the whole process. So he said, I don't support this. This is the wrong time. This is not in the best interest. It's going to destabilize. So in the end, all she asked is, what is coming at me? Can you tell me if you're going to have a vote of non-confidence towards me? So he responded, I haven't made up my mind yet, which I found very interesting because it's smart to respond that. But again, she's concerned about the politics and about herself. And you can see how there's a lot of misalignment between the different people. I can see that I have already 14 minutes and I haven't even gone through half of it. So I may have to break this into videos if I'm running out of time. Once Bell was chief of police, more information was going to the board, so twice per day, which again is, here's the thing. Does the police need to sit down with her twice per day, or do they focus on the task at hand? I don't understand why she had the authority to call for twice per day meeting when there is a critical point in the whole infrastructure. You have already made slowly resign. You clearly have created a lot of animosity with the mayor. Why don't you just let them do their job and then understand if there's anything she can do to help? But anyway, that's what she did. That she's saying that there was a lot of meetings where not all the parties were invited, and then there was a moment on which I didn't understand because the counselor of the convoy organizer was very supportive towards her, and he was saying, oh, you were in a silo, and they were laughing back and forth, and then I didn't understand why he was such a big supporter of hers. Now, the second witness is Patrick Morris. I'll try to be as fast as possible. You can stop the screen and then look at the details. But in short, he talked about the Project Hendon, that is an intelligence coalition between multiple parties that try to gather intelligence and spread it across the different bodies of control within not only Ottawa, where it was originally created, but over Canada. And he was very clear about the fact that since January, they had already talked in writing for a lot of people that this was coming, that it was not going to be just a short visit, because the mandates was the clear message that these people wanted to say, if you don't remove the mandates, we're not leaving, and the mandates were not going to be lifted. So clearly, this was not a short-term position or visit. He obviously is responsible for gathering and providing intelligence to the police. He's not responsible for the execution of the plans or even to give input to the plans. So his role is interesting, but it's not directly affecting the outcome or the plans or the success or not success of the different activities of the police. More examples of how he continuously was giving updates of how many trucks were coming to the city. I found these documents fascinating. I don't know why. Here, as time progresses, he's giving more accurate information. And then he used this phrase, you learn to stay within your lane. So again, he's ratifying, I give the intelligence, but I don't participate in the creation or the deployment of the plans. And then he started to provide a lot of assessment. His assessment was consistent throughout time. He was always saying, number one, this situation is not going to go away fast, because what they are looking for is the relief of these mandates, and the government is not going to give this. So obviously we need to be prepared, and it's escalating. It's escalating. Throughout all the documents, you can see the same thing, escalating, etc. I love that he said, I don't like to use the word extremist because there's not a lawful definition. So it's open for interpretation. And he made a very clear distinction between the fact that there were not any type of extremists as far as the intelligence was saying, but there were more lone wolves. And that was a real concern, because he was saying that based on his experience, every time there is a big protest, the vast majority of people are going to be cohesively protesting whatever they're doing, but there is always the risk of the infiltration, and he provided this at the same time. And also he ratified social media has an effect in the perception and the development of the different events. Here I have notes about the past and how they have learned from other protests in BC, the pipeline, etc. And then here we have something that is very interesting, because again, he's ratifying that is because of this legislation regarding this word, I'm not sure I can say it anymore, whatever, you know what I mean. Specifically, he was saying, listen, we had a multitude of people that had different issues to deal with in terms of protesting. So some people were mad with the crime minister, I should call him. With the crime minister, some people were mad with the premier, some people were mad because of the measurements, some people were mad because of the oil gas prices. So it was just the perfect storm. He didn't use his words. Those are my words. Clearly, that's obviously what he's referring to, but those were not his words. Here, he was saying that the politicians were not interested in connecting with the with the convoy, because any type of connection would give them a little bit of legitimacy. So they didn't want to do that. And now I understand why the major never wanted to sit down or talk to them, and why also Steve K had a private conversation with one of the representatives of the truckers. Here we see that, again, he didn't see as a real national security threat. He saw it as a national security threat, but his colleagues did not. And then here you can see that there is a disconnection between the perception of others and his own perfection. So here you see from January 21st, the proof of awareness of police slowly, which, by the way, started very regularly since January 1st, 2021. So for him to say that it was just a weekend is really odd. I don't understand why he insisted on that position. I really don't even want to speculate. And we want to see here the different priorities, because again, the convoy was coming back and forth in their eyes in terms of importance, not in terms of movement, but in terms of importance. And then they had multiple rallying points. So obviously when Toronto took place, they made a whole mess in their own plans. Now, he talks about the fact that Slowly brought a lawyer to one of those meetings on February 12th, which I found very odd. And there was also a disagreement between Slowly and Patrick, because Patrick was bringing to a table the report, and then Slowly said, there's nothing useful for me in this report. And obviously he disagreed, because he was giving them a lot of information. Then we had some questioning from the Ottawa police, nothing interesting, ratifying some dates. Here, convoy organizers, very important, that perhaps the most important part of the whole testimony was because he could not corroborate that there was let me put it the other way around. He corroborated that there was no intelligence that could prove that there was espionage, sabotage, foreign activities, or threat of violence to overthrow the government. So these are the 4 conditions that are required to invoke the Emergency Act. So this is the most important thing, the most important person in the whole organization with intelligence that grabs every single piece of information, is ratifying there was not any inch of proof for the requirements to invoke the act. So very important there. Here again, not confirmation of the extremist legal perception. Hendon was the report again that he was created in Ottawa. So that's on Ontario. So that's why the reason why it's focused there. And then in the end, the lead commissioner asked him some questions regarding to precision in terms of the potential national security threat, etc. And that was that. Here is the timeline for reference and my point of view. So Diane Deans, number 1 out of 10, that's my score for her. She answered a lot of questions with a hum, which is absolutely inappropriate. You should never, not even in a social context, it's appropriate to say particularly for an inquiry that the whole world is watching. A lot of laughing in the answers, which I said yesterday I don't appreciate, either in a boardroom or in a conversation, particularly in an inquiry. You're not supposed to be laughing all the time. But I realized through the recording with the major that's part of her personality. This is what I feel about her. She pulled, as they say, the rug under Slowly, and pulled the rug under Steve, and honestly threw under the bus, as they say, the major, by taping him. And by Steve, I mean Steve K, because she said, oh, Steve K was in a meeting and I was not aware. Anyway, 1 out of 10. And then Pat Morris, 10 out of 10. He confirmed intelligence that was given to the police force before the arrival, indicating that they were planning to stay and very likely they would stay. At the very least, he gave a date of February 4, but he said the date is not important. The intention of the information is what is important. He was very careful in the wording, and he provided new and important insights in the sense that Slowly was really not either reading, I guess, the report. Why wasn't he aware that this was going to stay for sure? I am unclear. But what I love about his testimony is that he ratified, as I said, that there is no intelligence that he was able to gather in regards to the confirmation of the 4 conditions to invoke the Emergency Act. Thank you very much for listening, and see you tomorrow.